Hello and welcome back to the second episode of the Foundry System Development tutorial. My name is Goody and I hope you enjoyed the last episode and are back with me today. I'm actually quite surprised of how big and positive the response was to the first video, and I am eagerly working on the next one. I know by when this video is coming out, there is already weeks or even more past the time that I posted the video. That came to many reasons. Most one is, besides my normal day job, that I was actually preparing a lot and wanted to have this video perfectly. And whenever you start trying to do something perfectly, it always ends up taking more time than anticipated before. But enough of that. Let's quickly hop into Foundry and see what I've prepared for this episode. We left off the last time with the basic actor created, but not anything in the front end. And this is what we are doing today. What I prepared, let's quickly look into it. This is that. This will be the future character sheet that we are working on today. And at the end of this video, it will not only look like that, it will be even able to do something, because right now those are all static values put into the sheet itself, and this is more or less just an HTML page that I prepared from a design side. So this video will be less about how to design something in HTML, and this will be more about how the code behind it actually works, and less about how to make it pleasing for the eye and do a little bit here and there. Of course, I will explain some of the stuff, but mostly it will be how the technique is working, the technical side is working. So for that, let's jump into the code and get to actually this point here, because for that we also need to prepare a little bit in code, and that we will do right now. And here we are back at the template.json. And in this file, we actually do an update due to what we did the last time, because we now need some more fields and some more data stored into it. So the first thing is we are still having the character, and now comes the more important stuff. I will quickly go over it. It's nothing to fear of. Just a little explanation of what we're gonna do here. So we have race, background, and home region. Those are actually numbers for the moment. The reason that I put them down as numbers, and they will be numbers in the future, is simply because they are there for an ID. Meaning, the race, the background, and the home region will be values that are corresponding to another object where it's stored. What is the bonus for being an elf, for example? What is the floor that you get for having a common background? And what will be the bonus for being out of a defined region? So that's more of the system behind it, and we will build this up soon in one of the next episodes. For now, it will be empty fields with just a number into it. Now we have character details with the nickname, the title, the age, height, weight, hair color, eye color, alignment, family, which is more of the family name or which family the character belongs to, appearances and backgrounds, which is more of a whole field where you can write down stuff, virtues and flaws, which are basically traits that you can put onto the character. So this is all about the roleplay aspect of the character, which is basically stored there. Then we have experience. So of course we have some kind of growth. We will work with XP. So we have a competence level, which is more of how to generate a character, but overall it's something that will be needed to be stored even after character creation. The background there is inside NetherActor. You're basically saying, okay, I want to create a beginner character, or I want to create an older or even godlike character where you basically have more XP in the beginning, but your level progression is still following a certain line, which is starting with level 1. So therefore you are not, when you're creating an old character, a level 20 character, for example, but you're creating a level 1 godlike character, which is the competence level. So that's stored there, and it is for some of the calculations coming down later. Then earned XP, which is a flat number. So you have 100 XP, then it will be stored there as earned. And there are values that we will calculate on that later down in most likely today's video partially, because how much you earned XP is defining the level, but also how much XP is actually free to be spent on certain stuff. And for that we need to calculate how many XP are already in this character. But as I said, we will come to that later. Then attributes, it's all of our 12 attributes with the start, the raised, and the bonus. Those are basically 3 values that every attribute has. The start value is what you can put out in the character creation. The raised value is everything that you put in from the XP side. And the bonus, well, it's bonuses that can become from different sources and are also stored here then. And that's it from the attribute side. Then we have base values, which are basically everything else that could be important for the character from a mechanical standpoint. So we have health, we have stamina, we have mana, and we have luck. By that, health, stamina, and mana are actually stuff that has a value right now, which has a max value, which has a regeneration value. So every turn you would regenerate part of that, and that value is stored there. And you have sustained, which is basically the field where it's stored when you are getting really injured and your max health is declined to some point. So for example, you have the health parameter, you have 500 health, you would regenerate 20 health each round. Then you have that as max value, and as rec you have the current value, which could be, for example, 100. And then you get a big injury, which would give you sustained damage of 30, which would then reduce that. And then the last points here are evasion, reaction speed, speed, crit chance, and crit mod. Evasion should be pretty obvious. Reaction speed is more of initiative-based value. Speed is how far you can run in one round. Crit chance and crit mod is basically we have a crit system that can happen, and how much chance you have for a crit is stored in the crit chance, and how much actual damage you do on top of that is stored in the crit modifier. And that's it, what we need for the character template itself. So with that, we can move on and edit some more files. So that being taken care of, we are looking now at the first new file that we are gonna create in this episode. We are creating the NetherActor.js. We will place that under modules, under objects, and then NetherActor.js. This file is basically the core object for the actor itself. It's not about how it looked afterwards, it's the plain actor. And for that, we simply have a few methods here that we will use for that. First of all, we start with export default class NetherActor, and we extend that from the actor class of the core Foundry. So it's basically everything that a core actor is, plus what we build on top. And therefore there are some stuff that we override and that we enhance. So first we prepare data. Prepare data is the core method that is called whenever something on the actor is changed and need to be put into. It will call some sub-functions that are also in here, but with that we are simply having here, in case we want to add something or edit something, we call super prepare data, which is running the core method that we are overwriting, and that's that. Next, we have 3 methods that are called together. So we start with the lowest one, which is set character values. In here, we do the calculation of some additional values, like what is the actual attribute value from the 3 things that are actually stored on the character. We will do that later. Don't worry, it will come up in this video. Then we have prepare player character data, which is calling this method. The reason is we can here have multiple methods called in order to have them ordered and to have them set out into different methods. So that's basically the one encompassing all those small methods where we do some calculations. And the actual real method is prepare derived data. This one is called from Foundry, and here we are just sending the data through from the core actor. So it's all handled through going down to set character values. Then we have 2 methods that are not yet connected to anything. We have set node, which will be our method for setting up a node up in the character, so we can take nodes for this specific character. And the other thing is add log entry, because we want to have a log for every change on the character. So this is also placed here to directly add an entry to the log. And with that, that's all it. We don't do anything yet. So we just set up the basic actor class. And the next thing is then we set up the actor sheet class. So for everything that you actually see. So let's jump to the next new file, the nether character sheet, which is then under sheets. It's again normal class. So let's look into that one. The next thing we're gonna do is now going in the direction of the front end with the nether character sheet. So that is then the object for the sheet itself, not the character in behind, but the front end, the sheet. And for that, we have here under modules the sheet folder, and there we created the nether character sheet. Jumping in here, it's a little bit more, and now the really interesting stuff starts. Here, I need to say it's also what we are doing now, apps version 2. So not the old version 1, where stuff worked a little bit different, but the version 2, which is the newer one, which started in version 12 and is going to be the main version of forms and of applications now, and will be the only one when we had, I think, in version 16. First things first, we need to define two constants, so API and sheets. The reason for that is because otherwise the next part would be way too long. So that's the shorter version for using that. And what we are gonna do here is export default class. We're creating the nether character sheet class and extend that from API. So here it would be Foundry application API dot handlebars application mixin, and we put in here sheets, which would be Foundry application sheets dot actor sheet version 2. So as you can see, it would be otherwise extend Foundry application API handlebar mixin brackets Foundry application sheets dot actor sheet version 2 bracket, and then starting. So that's only shortening a little bit, and it looks a little bit neater. Next thing then is we generate here Foundry sheet context, which is just the way of I am referring to everything that we put into the data. And if I need to address that or need to go into it here, I'm reading it from the sheet context. Next thing is a default thing we need to define, which is static default options. I think in the first version of the sheets, it was called just default. What we are defining here is basically the outlines. So we give it the tag of a form. Background here is, otherwise it would be not a form itself, it would be just a clear HTML. And we want to have a form for all the changes that we're gonna do to actually apply. That is the tag form. Then we have the classes with nether sheet and character sheet, which is just the CSS classes. As you may remember, we put it out here in the less folder. We have the character sheet, and it's basically all the character sheet stuff. Let's quickly jump over how I defined it here, because here it's called nether sheet character sheet. So everything inside here is in relation to nether sheet character sheet, and those are the classes I define here. So basically saying that all those CSS classes that I define here are actually applying here. Actions are not yet set, that we will do later in this video, remaining here until we use it. It's basically everything that we do in a sheet. Cast a role, save something. So all interactions are linked to actions. Forms, submit on change is basically saying whenever I change a value, submit the whole form, so the whole character sheet, data gets updated, and we are running. Otherwise, we would not have an autosave on changes. Close on submit is basically saying, okay, when I change something and the form is submitted, I don't want the sheet to be closed, because otherwise the sheet would close automatically as soon as you change something, and that's not behavior we want here. Last thing is position. Here we are putting in all the values of stuff that we want to have. So for example, we can define here the weight, the height, where we want the window to appear initially, and everything around that. The only thing I'm defining here is the width. We don't define the height because I want the height to be changing depending on what we are doing. Then we come in the direction of parts. Parts is a little bit of the same as partials, and we're gonna use both. So parts is basically saying I have one part of the sheet and another part of the sheet, and I can view them independently. Also, they are reloaded independent. This can be helpful if you have, for example, part of the sheet that you are not editing that opt, which has huge data in behind and functions and stuff like that. You don't want to reload that every time, then you can have that as a separate part. The same goes if you have something that you want to always view and another thing that only the owner of the sheet wants to see, which is what we are using here, and we will come to that in a moment. So we have the header, which if you remember in Foundry, let's quickly take a look here. This is my defined header. So everything above the menu is the header. And then we have here the sidebar with all the menus. And I could create then also a footer, which is sitting underneath. But basically, this is my header. This is my sidebar. Why it's called sidebar and not main? Because when I initially created that, I wanted this only the sidebar as a part, but this is not working with parts. Regardless, this is how it is now. So let's jump back. We are defining here the template, so basically the path to that part. We're saying system nether templates sheet character, header, handlebars, and sidebar handlebars. Next thing is the title. Here it's basically just the title line of that window. We say it's this actor name. Could edit the title to whatever we want, or we could concatenate it in a way that we say character dash character name. So for example, we could say here that we always want this in front and concatenate it here. I mean, we don't want that here. We just want the name, but you could do it that way. Next thing is an override. So configure render option, which is basically now the method that is responsible for rendering those parts. What we are doing here is overriding a little bit how that works. We still want to execute the config render options, but the next thing we want to do here is if this document is limited. Limited means if you have only the limited view. So remember in Foundry you have 3 options that you can give rights to character sheet, or in that case actor sheet, or every object in Foundry. You can either be the owner, you could be an observer, or you could have limited access, and that's referring to that limited access. So if someone with limited access is viewing that, then I want as parts only the header. If not, so if it's an observer or if it's a normal owner, then we want to have the header and the sidebar. Reason for that is later, just for design reasons, I also want to display a different limited view for everything with everyone with a limited view on it. So for example, NPCs could be shown differently with just limited data for a player, while I'll as GM see everything. That would be the reason for doing that. Right now, we're just only displaying the header for limited view because the other view is not yet generated and it's not that interesting. Maybe we will do later something interesting with it that will be in its own video. If not, it will be something that we can do off video. Next, prepare context. That's something that is always there and was there in the past as well. We override that as well. What we are doing here is basically generating the general data model that used behind our sheet. Why we are overwriting it? Because I like to have my own kind of structure and want to add separate data that is just defined or calculated when loading a sheet. So what we are doing here is we have base data, and for that we just grab the super of prepare context. So the normal prepared context, which is all the data that's coming from the actor class, and then recreate our own context. So first of all, I want to have the owner directly as owner. So I can put in the sheet owner and I have the owner. So base data document is owner, which is in that case not the owner name, but Boolean value if the owner is opening it. So in that case, I can have with handlebars if owner, then only the owner of the sheet sees what is inside this if. Edible goes in the same way. It's also a Boolean value, which is if this field is edible, then simple as this. Actor, now that's the object of the actor. System, which is the system info, so every data on that actor is inside there. Items, which is just a list of all the items attached to the actor. Then the config, which is this global config option that we defined in the nether.js file. IsGM is again Boolean value if the user who is viewing that is a game master, and effects are all the effects that are sticking to that actor. The next thing here is that I want to have the sheet context here. You may remember I defined up here sheet context as an empty object. So as soon as we prepare the context, we store the context in sheet context. And then we return it in this method for everything moving smoothly as it should be. Last point, or last thing that we override, is then onRender. So onRender is one of the last methods that is executed when showing your sheet to the world. So it's called first onRender start or something. I'm not completely sure about the methods order. We could look that up, but it's not important here. Then we have prepare context, and after that we have onRender when it's really rendering in. And what I'm doing here is setting up tabs. So you may saw on Foundry here that we have over here those tabs. Those are jumping through the sheet, and even here I have subtabs. So I need to have those two working here, and how this is done is with this definition. So I'm creating a constant which is called tabs, and in here I'm calling the Foundry method for tabs. So there is already defined everything that is necessary. The only thing for them to work is line. So I'm saying Foundry application UX tabs, and I'm giving the class name of the nav selector, the navigation selector. We will see how this is working in the handlebars file in a moment. Then we have the content selector with the class of the content, and we have the initial tab. And then we just bind this to the HTML itself. So this point element gives us the whole HTML back that is rendered. And with tabs.bind, we bind this HTML to the tabs. So it's actually active. And this class is working with the HTML. And that's it. So with that, we will jump now in the nether.js file and make this sheet available. And after that, we will look a little bit more in tabs itself, how they are set up. And then we continue. So let's jump over nether.js, and then we go a little bit more in sheets and HTML itself. Now, moving forward, we are looking at the nether.js file. Here we already started the last time, so let's go over the changes. The first thing is we need to import our NetherActor and our Nether character sheet. Here we just put in the path and that's it. We imported as NetherActor and Nether character sheet. The next part is here. Underneath our config setting, we are setting config.actor.document class NetherActor. So we say, okay, that is now an official document class called NetherActor. So now it's registered. The next part is here that we now need to register the sheet. And that is similar to what we done before and pretty out of the get-go. So we have here document sheet config, and that for its foundry.application.apps.document.sheet.config. We are simply putting that in a constant, so we can say here, okay, we unregister a sheet, so we unregister the core Foundry app1 sheet actor sheet. So now we have no sheet, and then we register the new sheet with register sheet for actors from Nether, so that's our ID, Nether character sheet, so that's basically the class that we imported here. And we say, okay, it's for type characters, it's make the default, so default true, and the label is nether.sheet class character. So that's again the label, which then could be pulled from localization. Then all the same, we can scroll down and only see preload handlebar templates. As I explained in the last video, here we preload all handlebar templates that we want to use as partials. And for what we are using, we have some partials. We will look at them in a moment. So only see here, nether template partials. So we have character sheet character, background, skill, combat, and progression, which are basically part of the main sheet. All of them are in local paths. All of them are loaded here. And that's it. Everything else is the same as we set up last episode. So that's all we need to adjust here in the nether.js file. And now we are looking quickly at all those handlebar files that we are using. So we start at the top, which is in our case the header. The header is pretty easy and pretty fast. So we have here the logo box, which is simply the image of the logo and our name of the system, which is NetherGuard. We then say here, okay, we want the actor name shown. And for the moment, everything else are static set labels and static set strings. So here's the level, here is level 12. That's not anything set. Here's the beginner trait. If we quickly look here, that's basically here, the level, that's this level, and that's beginner here. So all of this is just put into, and we will give them some logic in a moment. The only thing that has logic is here, the actor name. So we can put a 2 here, and now you can see it's now Ezra2. Here it's updated, here it's updated. You can remove that, and it's all updated. So that is what we will go into it in a moment. Going back into here, we then have this as header box. The next part is the sidebars. So the sidebar is again one big div box where we have everything for the sidebar. We have here the image box, then we have here some values for body, mind, magic with static values. Here's the reaction speed. That's all static values at the moment, so this is that part here. Then we have the resource bars, which we will take a look into in a moment. Those are here, simply set here with static values, nothing to fear of. Now we come in the interesting part of tabs. So tabs are already into Foundry, but also not. You saw me describing it here when we registered them. Now the explanation around it. So we have here navigation selector, which is set as tabs, content selector, which is set as content, and initial tab 1. Now we need to look where we define those. What is tabs? What is content? What is tab 1? That is what is happening here. So we have first a navigation. This is here the navigation bar that's correspond to this line here. What we are doing here is pretty easy. We have some div box, and inside the div box we have actually an icon, and on the, underneath is a link, and this link is doing all our work. In here in the navigation we say that's tabs and that's menu tabs, so to have it stylized a little bit, and we set this as primary tab group. So there are two types of tabs. There are primary tabs and there are secondary tabs. Primary are always the higher hierarchy. You could, in theory, work always just with primary tabs, but just for my logic, the primary tab is everything we switch through, and the secondary tab is on one side when we want to have subtabs. Then we are defining here, that is data tab and tab group. The tab group is again primary tabs, which also used here. So they are corresponding to each other, and every link is getting a data tab, which is tab 1, tab 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So when we're saying the initial tab is tab 1, it's corresponding to this definition of tab 1. And this is everything for the menu of tabs. The second part is now we actually need to show what comes out when I click the menu. This is that part here, where we say, okay, we have here content box. That's not an important part. Important part is here section content, so class content. And that is what we are referring again here when we say content selector dot content. So content selector is from the content class, and we are here setting the content class. Inside we have the different tabs. They again have the class tab and data tab 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, which is then the displayed content from data group primary tabs. And you may say here that I have put in a simple string, which is father or settings. So it's paths or settings, which is then again just string. And when we look here, we see here paths and see here settings. So this is also a menu. It looks completely different, but it is also just link. And we are displaying here, that's all the content box, and these sites are just not defined yet, so we are just showing here the string. Everything else is then here a normal site, and we will take a look at that in a moment. Everything here is just another handlebar site that is just displayed, and we will look at this in a moment. So what is done here? Here are now the partials. So what is the effect of a partial? It's simply saying everything that is in this file in charactersheet.js/character is actually put into this div box. And it can be as big as small, whatever we define here. And the good thing about it is that I can basically pull different files together in one file that is then rendered together, which gives me the advantage of having not one large file with 1,000 lines, but very small files where I always find what I'm looking for. And here I decided that every tab has its own file. So we have character, background, skill, combat, progression. When we look here, character, background, skill, combat, and progression as own tabs. And when we then take a look back to those files, we say here, character, it's all out with 100 lines, all separated, nothing crammed, everything visible. And here again, it's simple HTML. We have static names, we have static values, nothing is yet of function. And also those input boxes are just disabled for the moment. They are all set to text, even though they are maybe for numbers, because age will never be a text. It should always be a number. And it's all just for the style. So let's quickly go over it. If here, background, it's again just some boxes and some text. Same goes for skills, which is more or less empty for the moment. We have combat, again, static info, and progression. And here in progression, we have again the same that we have for tabs before. We have a navigation now with secondary tabs as data group, as you can see here as well. And we have then data tab with tab 2, 2-1, tab 2-2, tab 2-3 and 4. And here is then the section for content 2 with again just div boxes where we have the content of some tables. And those tables again are all filled with static data for the moment, which we'll come into in a moment. And with that, we have here everything set. So again, this is not a tutorial for how to build an HTML file or how to do all the front-end work that it looks good. This can be maybe a second tutorial series later, someday, sometime, but not in this video. Now we need to make this part here all smart, and this will be the next part. Quick addendum on that is when we look here, of course, I'm always trying to have everything with classes, and the reason for that is that all those CSS definitions are in here. So if here the character sheet CSS file, and I will go into details, it's just normal CSS with width, height, position, all those different stuffs. We can, that's the only thing I'm quickly explaining, have here background image with URL, and we always start here when we're referring to something at the root of our system, not of Foundry, but our system. So we go straight to assets and then the image folder, and then we get the image file or whatever when we set URLs. And here we have already 577 lines of CSS code. So there's a lot for stylizing that. And as I said also in the explanation last video, we put here some comments, have everything a little bit structured. That is everything for the menu bar. Div box is holding main info about character, div box holding the sidebar. Everything a little bit structured, so I know what those classes are for. And when we look here in the full CSS file, which is, yeah, even a bit shorter, but we have here now the full path and not just the small that we defined here. So here's just defined header boxes and it's together in this main thing. Here we have nether sheet, character sheet, and under class, and everything structured together with no comments, everything just underneath, everything auto-generated. While here it's a little bit more viewable and editable. That's the whole reason we are using less. So enough from this side of our project, enough of design CSS. Now let's go to the logic and enhance what we already have. So, and now we start transforming those handlebar files a little bit. We start here with the header file and the changes are pretty simple. So a quick cut and then I will explain. Now, after a quick change, we this. So the only real thing that already is seen is that I put in here a line break. Now we come to the important part. So I don't want plain old text inside those handlebar files. The reason for that is that I can simply switch out for another language when it's not hard-coded. So for some stuff, it would be fine. For example, the system name NetherGuard would be the same in all languages, but it's easier to go into the pattern to always have stuff parameterized and never write directly in the files. Therefore, when you change something, it will change everywhere and not only partially. And an additional bonus is, if you're sometimes like me, a little bit dyslexic, then that way you can fix it in one file and don't need to search for your bad writings all over the place. So with this, I'm saying, okay, localize. So look up in my localization file, which is here, for nether system name. So we have here the big object nether and here the system name, which is NetherGuard. So I can reference here directly and the actual file will have then, or what is shown to the user is actually having here NetherGuard. Then name was already done. So it's here the value of actor name. It has text component in the name. We saw already, so this is working like that. Name is actually a little bit special, so it's done like this. How it's normally done, we will look into in a moment. Then here we have again localize nether system, so that's now another object, and level shorts. As you can see here in level shorts, we have level. Again, it's something that would be in two languages the same, so in English and in German. But for example, if for some reason someone will translate all of that in a language that has a different letter set, so types of letters, in terms of Japanese, for example, then it would become in handy here as well. Next thing is here, now I'm referring system experience level, and that's something we did not set yet, so we will do that in a moment. The last thing here is nether system and then system level comp1, so that it's shown as beginner. What I'm doing here is simply concatenate what I have here together. So it's nether system with the dot already. And then I want to add whatever user has in the competence level. And I changed out the templates that here it's level comp1 for beginner. So if we take a look here in the template, it should look like now like this. And we have here earned XP, and from that we can divert the level in a moment. And with that, we changed everything here. We now can quickly take a look inside Foundry how this would look. So as you can see here, we have now NetherGuard still saying here, even though it's localized. We have here our name field. We have here level as it was set up by us. But here the level system beginner is not completely because, as I said, I changed how templates is working. So if I now would create another test actor, we now would have a new default value. As you can see here, beginner is completely right. The problem is that here was beginner already written beforehand as value, but we now decided that we don't want to have the plain text, but we want to have a translation. So for that, we cannot change it here. We would need to change the data, and I will do that just for the demo reasons here. In the end, it would never happen now following up because the default is always set like that. So we can ignore that. And here is no level because we need to calculate the level now. So I would say there's one thing I want to do beforehand, and that is here character progression, the experience. I want to have this field here for the moment to be able to set directly here in how many experience points we have in total. Later, I want to change that behavior, but for now, to test the calculation of the level. So let's quickly jump into this progression tab and change the behavior of those two input fields. And for that, we jump right in here. As you can see, it's the character progression. Here's the experience. And here are the two number fields that we saw inside Foundry. Now we only need to change the behavior here a little bit. And also I want to have gone all those add event, character progression, experience, add reward progression. So all the hard-coded stuff that is at the moment in here. Now let's open up everything here. There are stuff that I will leave for the moment. So for example, those numbers here, we will come to them in a later step in today's video. But for now, let's do it this way. So now let's take a look how we can calculate the level and how we are sending that to the sheet. This is an example of something that will happen a lot in the sheet in general. And I will not show every part, just this is part of the explanation. So what I'm doing here is in prepare context, I'm gonna add some data. And I'm doing this with saying here, the context, I'm setting that to this calculation experience context. So I'm basically putting that in a function. You could put it here all in prepare context. There are different ways how to invoke the method. I'm using this here because of convenience. You could also add only different parts with saying, for example, I want to here have context.system.experience and only want to set this special part with a function like this point calculate experience. Could be also an option. I'm using here the override of the whole context, just pure out of convenience. So let's take a look at calculate experience. What we are doing here is pretty simple. So I first have here some variables that we are defining. So earned XP is part of the core data, so it's always saved. So I'm setting here the variable for systems experience earned XP, which we defined in the template how it should. Then I need a competence level. So this is the second thing that is set in experience always. So I'm grabbing this here too and put it into competence. Then there are two things that we want to set. The first thing is spend XP and the second one is level. So spend XP will be calculated later down the line. It's a little bit more complicated and is more or less too much for this video because it's not important for how to build a system. Just in short, what I will do in the sheet later and what I will put here is basically a calculation of every attribute and every skill that is in the sheet. I calculate how much XP it would have cost to level it, and then this will be the spend XP of the sheet or of the character. With that, I'm making it more or less uncheatable, so to say, but it's also due to the fact that I want to have the character generation and all the level up inside Foundry and not in something else. So everything will be in Foundry and therefore I can do that here. But as I said, it's too much as for this tutorial. So we only focus on level. What I'm doing here is calculate the level and it's simple. So it's this simple math equation. So I take the earned XP, divide it by 1000, multiply it with the multiplier for the competence level, -1 in the end gives me then the level. We will see that in a moment inside the sheet. And what I'm doing here is then context system experience spend XP set to spend XP and context system experience dot level set to level, return the context, and therefore it's flowing with that inside Foundry or inside the actor. When we now jump back to Foundry, we can open here up our character. We see we are in beginner, and now we are level 8. Why we are level 8? Because I tested it beforehand. So we have now here this field experience. So the total amount of earned experience is set here. And what I'm simply doing now is setting it, for example, to 8001 will lead to level 8. If I'm putting that up to 9001, we will be level 9. If I do 19.1, it's 19. And the reason 0.1, because of how the calculation is, if it's only 19,000, then you are just shy of level 19. It's still level 18. So that's more or less the progression and how I calculate here the level up here with the total amount of experience that is inside. The only thing here is it's the same as the field here, but let's quickly jump back to how we are setting this up. Inside here, spent experience is still disabled because since we are calculating it, there is never a reason to set it. So the field is disabled, but this here is the field that we are actually setting. Let's take a quick look. We're simply saying it's an input field. It's not disabled, so the disabled is gone. It's a number. And then the most important part are name and value. What I'm doing here is setting up that the name is system experience earned experience, and the value is also system experience earned experience. What I'm saying to Foundry here is everything that I change. So if I change the number, I want to set that value for saving it to the actor to system experience earned XP. So the name field is always saying where I want to save whatever is in the input field. While the value field is here filled by the handlebar, and I'm saying here system experience earned experience. And that's something that is set inside our sheet.json. So nether character sheet, we see here, the context is served, and in context we have system, which is the base data document system. So I'm simply saying here, please show me the value that is set there. And as soon as it's put into the value field here, we can see what is actually saved to the character. And with the name attribute, we are setting where we want to save it. So for example, if I would change this here, then it would override a second attribute inside the actor. Let's do this real quick. We just add a 1 here. We save that. Then we go back to Foundry. We reload Foundry real quick. So our change is then live in Foundry. And now we see here, we have 19,000. We put that to 19,005. And now we saved it because we changed something. On change, we submit directly. And now we see it's not saved because we saved it to a different value. And that is something we can quickly check. So if I go now here, I can always say export data. I then save it to, for example, my downloads folder. Quickly save that. And now let's take a quick look inside here. So we opened that up here. That's basically what I can export from Foundry, which is also a JSON file. And when I scroll, well, I don't need to scroll. When I look here under experience, competence, earned XP and earned XP1, we saved it now to earned XP1 instead of earned XP. And therefore, we are not showing earned XP1. We are only showing earned XP. So it's always showing this number. Changes will be written to this one. And that's the whole magic of how we interact between the sheet and the actual data behind it. As you can see also here, experience, the level is not saved. So the level is always calculated from the number in the earned XP field here and from nothing else. And that's the basic behind how an actor and also an item sheet works. So it's basically the same for items. It's also this kind of data structure that is in behind. It's the same when it comes to files. It's just not an actor, but an item. And this we will do in the next episode where we look more into items itself, mainly because I want to get this episode out as soon as possible. I'm already taking way too long to record those parts and the episode will be long enough most likely. So next episode we will look into items, but also how those items then can be put into the character. So looking forward to this episode. I think for now we already have down the basics. The only thing that I will do now in between episodes is prepare everything. So all those values here will be sit in our translation file, and some parts of the values will be already calculated. I will show you real quick next episode of how it's looking then, what I changed, what I did, but it's more or less the same that we did here for the level calculation on top of how the experience is. So I will only set up here, for example, the calculation of attributes, that we can change some of the attributes, and then see how much XP it would cost to level up. The buttons here will still not work, so that we will do later in terms of how you can set up actions, the same as with add event. So all this stuff we will set up next episode. Or to be more precise, the buttons we will most likely set up in 2 episodes. Next episodes we will look into item sheets. I'm looking forward to it. I hope you had fun today. If there are any questions, please send them via comments or join me on my Discord. I'm always happy to chat with you. And yeah, see you then in the next episode. Bye for now.